forms of Lightroom currently available. One that's called Classic, which is based on your hard drive at your computer station. And then what they're now calling Lightroom, which is more cloud-based. Your pictures are available on the cloud as well as on your computer, but it's a little simpler format than the Classic one. The basic engine that does the editing, the develop module in Lightroom, is pretty much the same as the Adobe Camera Raw module that's in Photoshop. The Lightroom Classic, which keeps all of your images on your desks, on your home system, has access to more abilities within that developer and the ability to use third-party software, which as of now, the Lightroom that's on the cloud does not. The Lightroom on the cloud, some people find to be simpler because it doesn't demand that you follow the rules as to how images are stored and where you can put them. So you can put them pretty much everywhere, which is, I think, a blessing and a curse. Because you can put them anywhere, you are responsible. If you follow the other one, you're responsible to follow the rules, but then it takes care of all the other work for you. I find that I do best when I'm not given a lot of choices. So following the rules there for me, at least for keeping track of my images, is something that I like. The one in the cloud doesn't give you the chance to publish, do maps, make PowerPoints, make books, and stuff like that, which the desktop one does. It's my guess that Adobe is getting ready to create a new class of programs, one based for the hobbyist, one based for the professional photographer, which is what Lightroom Classic is, and then, of course, Photoshop, which is for the more creative types. Okay? If you want to learn just simply and you want to make sure you're not having to pay your monthly fee, Elements is a whittled down version of Photoshop. It's not as powerful and it doesn't give you as much depth to use with the program, but it can edit a lot of images and it's simpler to use. It's based, for a less intense experience. So these are all good things. So what I think I'll do to start out with, at least, is pop over and let's go through the program for tonight. We're going to spend a little time talking about Photoshop just as a machine, just as a place to work. Once we feel we've probably had enough of that, and it won't take long, I'm sure, I want to move over and give you a talk about part of how the camera works, and we're going to talk about tones and values. And then we're going to go into an image that I've been working on since we went to Scotland, Bob. So that's been about 6 years. And theoretically, if things work like I pretend they do, I know more now than I knew then. And so we'll have some new techniques to look at, and I'll hopefully be able to show you how that tonal information can be transferred into Photoshop to make your picture sing more. Does that sound like a reasonable plan?
Mm-hmm.
As always, you're invited to break in anytime I get off the track too much, or if I explain things that only a person on some kind of a strange psychedelic drug can handle. Let me know, and I'll try to come back to earth for a few minutes. I hate to be that person who's so heavenly minded that he's no earthly good. So clip my wings, bring me back to square one, and we'll work from there. Does that sound like a plan?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's the one that's been around the longest, and it has all these various things that you can do with it. And I only basically use the first two. And I use it because of it requires that I maintain a discipline in where I put my photographs. If I were to use the other form of Lightroom, I can put my photographs most everywhere, and it doesn't care. Which in that form, that Lightroom is more similar to Adobe Bridge, which comes with Photoshop. This develop module here occurs as Adobe Camera Raw in Photoshop. And It's the same between the two. They're both non-destructive. So just because you're using Photoshop should not cause you a problem. So getting images into Photoshop is the first problem. So I'm going to take, oh goodness, I'm going to take this, which is a Canon RAW file, and I'm going to bring it over here on top of Photoshop, and it put it right into Photoshop. Did you know you could do that?
Yep. Yes.
Just drag and drop. And because it was a RAW file that had not been worked on, it came into Adobe Camera Raw. And this is basically the same engine and tool as we saw in Lightroom. So we have the same tools. I've rearranged this order a little bit, and I forgot today to put it back in its default order, so just bear with me. And I do that because I have found this work order to be more in keeping with the workflow that I like to use. So what have we got here to talk about? We start out with a histogram. And anybody, what does this little white triangle tell us?
The highlights, the blinkies.
The blinkies, the highlights have been clipped. And we've all been told that that kind of is the kiss of death and we can move things down. But here's a trick you may not know. See this little thing here where it says HDR here?
Mm-hmm.
If I click on that, try it on my own. Notice what it just did. It opened up the image as it's contained in the raw file. So when we've told you in the past that you have a lot of information to the right-hand side, this is the information that's there. Did you know that?
No. Richard, I noticed today when I was looking at it that the HDR was grayed out, and I didn't know why.
Well, it was grayed out here before we started it, I think.
Couldn't click on it and get it to do anything, so I was wondering what it was there.
That's what it's there for.
Was it a raw file, Virginia?
It was, but I did bring it into Photoshop through. Sorry about that. She's scratching. I did bring it into Photoshop through Lightroom. So
and that doesn't make any difference. It'll work in both places, and it'll work in Lightroom. It'll even work on JPEGs and TIFFs. So if you bring a JPEG in, it should. So if it didn't show up at all, that means you didn't have anything up there, that you had in fact exposed to the right far enough that you didn't have any information up in the HDR area.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, fine. It's tricky that way.
So once you've done that, do you make adjustments in the sliders based on that information?
Well, you can. You can decide how much more of it you want to recapture. So let's see, we got light here. So here's exposure, and I can start bringing that data in. See?
Yeah.
And I can decide how much of it I want to recapture. So in this case, I have brought in all of this upper level information in, but of course I've begun to have some problems with the blacks, and that I've cropped those, and deciding how much of that you want to bring back. See me bringing them back now? So I'm bringing the faith in, and I can say, I probably think that's all my shadows recaptured. Maybe move the blacks up a little bit more.
So it's not showing you what the left side has over.
Well, that's because our camera, no, it doesn't. The high dynamic range is reporting that information that is kept in the raw file or in the file that is not available to us on the monitors with the systems we have.
Right, but it's showing you like overexposed areas in the whites, but does it show you the underexposed areas in the blacks?
No, it does not go on beyond that. So we have no more information on the black than we had before. But I just brought those back by using this slider here.
Okay.
See, I brought them. Yes.
If it was an underexposed picture, can you click on that side to get any data back?
If it
Like-
underexposed, like me, was more, you had it more in the darks and not up in the whites.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you use the slider. So that's where you bring the shadow up.
So, but you can't use the HDR to do anything
Well,
with
there
it.
won't be anything there. If you click on the HDR there, it'll look like this. It's empty
Okay,
because there's no information there. So it only shows you the information that you have in the upper ranges. But remember,
Okay.
this is where most of the detail is. And once we get into Photoshop, we can bring a lot of that dark information back. It's in there. So this is a neat little trick. So remember that in this upper range, in this third that goes from here to here, about half the information that's in your file is stored in that area because we brought it down. See how the information we have in the clouds up here?
Mhm.
We didn't have that before. And let's just
So
take
that's
this.
a neat trick.
So bring this,
Yeah.
see here? I brought the exposure back to expose. That's what it was when we took it. And look, there's nothing in the sky. Everybody with me?
Yep.
I can see in my shadows, but my sky is worthless, as is my water. By bringing that information back into the photograph, look at that sky. Could you have imagined that that was there?
Mhm. No.
Okay. So this is a trick for bringing that sky that was just worthless, other than having to throw this picture away, because this picture has some potential, I think. So we can go through here and make any adjustments, although at this point, this is probably the only adjustment that I would make in Camera Raw. So here's the other trick that we've been playing with in here. I have set my computer that when I'm working in Camera Raw, that when it sends it back to Photoshop, it automatically saves it as a smart object. Now, let me show you again how I got there. Cancel. That you only have to do this once to set your default. Just come down here to this image that tells you information about the picture and clip on it, and you'll get this draw up that allows you to make some decisions about what the camera is going to bring in. So this camera is a 24 megapixel camera. I have it set to being 300 pixels per inch if I was going to put it on the screen, because that makes sense. But the big thing for us is that I want to open it as a smart object. I click OK. So now when I hit Open Object here, this brings it into Photoshop as a smart object. Another trick that we've talked about here, and one that Bob has shared with us, is I can take this image and I can make a copy of this smart object, and I'm going to do it as a new smart object via copy. I do that so that it is totally independent of the one that was there before. So I'm going to click on that. I have a new smart object here. I can double click on the little symbol in the corner. And what I can do is I can bring that exposure back, bring it all the way back to 0 if I want. So I've got all this nice detail in here. I can save it. So now I have a smart object that's bright, and I have a smart object that's dark. And what I can do now is I can take this smart object here. I come up here and I can select the sky. So there you can see the marching ants that it's selected the sky. I can come down here and hit this little square with a circle in it to make a mask. So it's made a mask that shows off the sky but hides the water. I want it to be the other way around. So I'm going to click on the mask. I'm going to hit Command or Control and the letter I, and I'm going to switch them. And look what I have now. I have an image where I can see the detail in the sky and all the best of the detail that I had in the original picture. So now I'm in a very nice place to start work. So that's a trick to put in your back pocket, and you can have as many of these as you need to have. So we can take that and we can work on it as well.
How would I know to do all that?
Because you listen to me, because I teach this trick about every other time.
The,
How's that?
the real question I have is, okay, I get the smart objects and all, and then when I open it up in Photoshop and do whatever I'm going to do with it, then how do I finish it? It's still a smart object, and so how do I get it so I'm ready to print it and all?
Well, let's do something else to this. Let's see, what can we do to this?
So can you open it then? I mean, it's in Photoshop, but
Yeah.
I just have troubles then. Usually what's coming up then for Photoshop is all the adjustments that I need to do to the thing. And
Right.
then when it's, when I'm finished with it, then quote, I open it. And when I open it, there are about 3 things to the bottom there. I don't know what to do.
All right. Well, let's do something to this. Let me put a
Richard?
little vignette on it, because this is another one of my favorite tricks. So if I
It's
come down here to the bottom, and you see there's this little kind of like information sign down here in the bottom. If I click on that, I have all these adjustment layers, and I'm going to hit curves. So it puts a curves adjustment layer on it. And what I'm going to do is kind of darken the edges. So I'm going to bring that down to darken the sides a little bit. Oh, look what that did to the sky. Is that not marvelous? So I've darkened it up. And
Now,
what
how
I
did you
want-
know to click there on the curves and not somewhere else?
Because I just guessed.
Okay.
Now you want something more precise? I can do it this way. Let me go back. Now, if you look on the bottom here,
Mhm.
this attaches it to the layer below. This one here takes it back to where you started. So I'm going to push on that button, click. So this is where it was before. Up here, you see this little hand with the finger and the 2 arrows?
Yep.
That's on an awful lot of your various adjustment layers. If I click on that, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on the sky. And notice there's a dot on my graph over there to the left-hand side.
Mhm.
It's bringing it down from that color right there. So
Mhm.
now I just picked that was the one that I wanted to work on. You understand how we
Richard,
did
now I
that?
have a problem with sometimes if I go to do something and I don't know if it's like if I go to use the healing brush or whatever, because I have a couple layers, it won't clean it up. And I'm not sure if that's the thing that it happens, but there are some things that I try to do to smart objects that I can't do.
A lot of things you
Without
cannot do
raster.
to smart objects, and later on I'm going to show you one of a couple of workarounds to do that. In fact,
Okay.
we can do one of them right now. I've already got this now, and I said, I wish I would have done that to the sky from the very get-go. So I'm going to put this back in my stack. I'm going to come down here. This is the mask I made of the sky.
Mhm.
Remember? I'm going to hit down my Alt or Option key. And I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to drag it up to the one I'm on right now. I'm going to replace that layer mask. So now that layer mask is there. And you can see the mask. It made it red for me. In this case, I want to reverse it. I'm going to click on this mask right here. And I'm going to hit Command and the letter I, Command and Control. And so now the sky that we just made is showing, and this is the part that's been masked out. If I don't want to see that, there is a backward slash key. It's just above the return key on the right-hand side, on the next to the left of the right bracket key. If I click on that, that turns that mask on and off. So that's another one of those tricks you want to put in the back pocket. So now,
Where is this nice little mask off and on button?
okay, on your keyboard, if you look at your keyboard, the 3rd row down, which is the row that starts with Q and ends with P, over to the right, there's P, a left bracket, a right bracket, and then there's a backward slash key and a straight line key. Do you see that one?
Yes.
That's the key. Right there. Isn't that
What's
fun?
the actual name of that cute little key?
I only know it as the mask on and off key.
Okay.
Slash key.
I'm sure it's got a fancier $3 name, but it's a backslash key.
Okay.
The one down by the question mark is called a forward slash. The one up here on the same row with the letter P is called a backslash. Well, now I've got a nice picture.
Now, Richard, if
Yes.
you had hit control or command control option E
Yep.
and put everything on one little neat layer,
Yep.
because it's a smart object,
Nope.
does everything get affected? Or when you do that, it's not a smart object?
Let's do it right now. I'm going to
Okay.
hit Shift, Command, Control, Option, and the letter E. So it's just made a composite layer here. And I can turn these off, and it's there. If I turn it off, the ones that I had before, the smart objects and all those masks, are down here. I haven't erased them. So this allows me to keep all this information down here without erasing it. If I did a collapsed layer, which is the normal way of getting this information, I would lose these layers.
Okay, but what I mean is like, at the very beginning when you opened it up as a smart object,
Yep.
and then you did a workaround by turning it into an independent smart object. Is
Yes,
that what you did?
that's what that is. That's independent, right?
Turned an independent smart object so that if you made changes to the second smart object, it won't affect your first smart object.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, now at that point, if you had done shift control option E, letter E, whatever, to get that into there, does everything you do to that layer change the layers below it?
No.
Okay.
So let's put a layer here below it. This is the layer we just made.
Right.
This is the first layer here, and that's where I made the clouds darker.
Yeah.
I'm going to come down here to my adjustment layer icon.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the top so I can put a solid color in there. And I'm going to put a red layer in there. See it?
Yep.
Click OK. There's a red layer there. If I turn off the thing we just made, it's red.
Okay.
But this is on top. What I did down here doesn't affect once I make one of these. Now, let's say I wanted that red layer to be my top layer. I would have to erase this.
Right.
And then I could do my Shift, Command, Control, and the letter E. And I would have a layer now that is just all red.
Okay, now is that red layer affecting your curves one layer?
No, it's
Down
hiding it.
below?
Because this works from the top
Right,
down.
Okay, yeah, okay, I gotcha. Okay, so it doesn't affect the other layers, like as if you had a smart object and just made a standard copy of it,
Right.
whatever you did to the second layer, it happens in your first layer.
It works its way down. Whatever you do on the top works on the bottom.
Right, but when they're independent of each other, they don't affect each other.
Exactly.
Right, okay. I just wanted to know then if you did a, control shift option E, if that affects the sublayers, but it doesn't, so that's
Yeah,
good.
no,
Okay,
it's a
that's
stamped visible. It's like you collapse the picture.
Sure, gotcha.
Okay. But it allows you, because let's say I did this and then I said, gee, I think I'd like to try this with the clouds not having that adjustment area on it. So I'll turn this off.
Yeah. Okay.
And now I'll turn that adjustment layer off. Okay. So I'm going to click to here. I'll do another. So I've got one here. Stamped. Let me put this up to the top. So this is the one without. This is the one with.
Right.
So now I can look to see. And by the way, when I show you the final one we're doing tonight, I start the program out with two that I've done exactly this. So you can see the before and the after.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now, you go ahead.
Because I was going to say, I couldn't figure out how to get an independent smart object layer. So what I used to do was work on a smart object layer and then another one, and then do control option and make a stamp layer, and then work on that one and then make another stamp layer, because I couldn't figure out how to make different smart object layers that didn't affect each other.
Well, if I told you that I do that a lot, that's actually a very good workaround. But here's the neat thing about this. Now I've got this sky here that I've got the darker sky. So I'm going to come down to this image here, and I'm going to put, what the heck? I'm going to put a levels layer on it. That's this little gadget over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and darken it a little bit there. So that's what this levels does. But let's say I only wanted it to affect the layer directly below it. This little gadget here attaches it to this layer, so it won't affect any of the layers below. If I turn that off, it doesn't affect any of these other layers. This only affects the layer that I have it above it. So I can do it over here by hitting this button, or if I click between two things, let me undo that.
Richard, is that a clip button?
That is a clip button. So here, if I hold down the Alt or the Option key and hover this back. So I've got this clip layer here. I'm going to hit Alt or thing, and I see how it came up. I can clip it there. So this means it only affects this layer. And if I turn this layer off, it has no effect on anything below it. Or I can do it on the object when it is. So that's a very powerful tool to allow you to do an event right where you want. Now let's go back here to our nice sky. Get rid of this sucker. So this is the nice sky. This is the picture. If I save it now, File, I'm going to do it as a save as, just so we can find the original one. So I'm going to save this as, I can do anything with it I want now. I can print it from here. And this is what we'll print. I can send it as a JPEG, and let's do that. I want to put it in the contest. I want to put it in to a F3C contest. So I'm going to come over here to my file. I'm going to come down here to export as, click on this. I want it to be a JPEG. This is the size it wants it to be. That's too big. I'm just going to change it down by 50%. That made it smaller. So it's made it smaller. This is the size it is. I'm going to embed the color profile so that doesn't muck up on me. I'm going to export it. Click that button here. It asks me what I want it to be. So now it's that same name we made, but it says JPEG on it, and I'll save it. And it's done. It's saved. Go back to our...
Why are you exporting it rather than just doing a save as JPEG?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we'll look at that in just a second. Let me just show you that they're here, though. So that was here on the... There it is right there, because I had it saved to the desktop. But double-click on that. There it is. Which means I can print it as well. By doing it this way, first off, with the new Photoshop, you don't always have the ability to save it as a JPEG. So we get here to the Save As. Photoshop. If you notice there, do you see JPEG in that list?
No.
I think they got problems then.
But you do save as a copy, and then you have the JPEG option.
You can, but this, by doing it the other way, which is the way that Adobe's trying to move you, you overcome that problem because it gives you a chance to make some other adjustments there.
So I have to export it instead of save as a copy.
I think you'll find once you get used to it that you'll be happier with it.
Richard, is there an option in there? I didn't notice it to size the long size. I just noticed the original size of the file.
Oh, when you go back to that, let's go
Richard,
back.
when you did export that, I usually change that to, I think it's high. Let me show you the image size.
Here's your image
The
size.
quality to 7. I usually change that to 7. Does that matter?
Well,
The quality.
if you change the quality down, it'll make the file smaller. So I'll usually, if I'm going to put it embedded like in an email or something like that, I'll move the quality down to make the size smaller. But if I don't have that limitation, I'll usually try and keep the quality up a little bit higher.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so here, let's go back here. At 100%, here's 100%. So let's say I wanted to make my long side 1,000. So I put 1,000 in there, and look what happened to the height. See that?
Didn't
Because
change.
they're linked.
So it changed that. So it's 16.67%. It's the size I wanted, so I can put it in. I find, and I have shared with you before, that if you have it convert to an sRGB here, is you'll see the color change. Let's undo it. So this is what I did in Photoshop. This is what I want the picture to look like. If I tell it to convert to an sRGB, it'll oftentimes change colors. So Donna, that's part of why I've gone to using this system, because when I mistakenly in the past have done that, and it has given me something that I didn't want.
Now, Richard, when
And
you,
it'll tell me what file I'm going to put it in.
Well, you're ready to here. If you go to export, it asks you to name it. So I'm going to aim it. I'm going to call it for Donna. And I'm going to put it in my F3. Now I'll put it in my volunteers folder. And I'm going to save it.
Yeah, so that's a few extra steps for me.
Well, if you're going to put it in the same folder it was, you don't have to do them.
Okay,
And it's not like walking around the block, Donna. It's not even a flight of stairs.
So it will pop in, because right now, yes, what pops up is where it's at to begin with. So if I want to change it, then I would change it. So
And you'd have to do that in the save as also.
Right.
I mean, in other words, if you don't want to put it where it's already, let's go back, save as.
No,
If
I
you
do
don't
save
want
a
it to go
copy.
here,
Yeah, I don't do save
you have to
as.
make another step.
Yeah,
and
I
then you
don't
have to
do
make
save as. I do save a copy.
Yeah, well, so this saves you that. I think saves you that. It's not that that many things, you know.
Yeah, I use Bridge, so it's a little different.
Yeah.
It just opens my file folders differently. So.
But that's because that's what you picked, and that's okay.
Right.
Because basically, I'm using Photoshop now. Bridge doesn't care. I'm just telling it to put it where I have it in my system, because that file, that volunteer file, is not part of my Lightroom files. It's just on my desktop.
Right.
It doesn't care. I'm not using Lightroom right now. I'm just using Photoshop and Bridge and my computer. However I want to set it, I could set it anywhere. It doesn't care.
Yeah.
I heard another in there for a second.
I've always exported out through Lightroom Classic because that's where the file starts. But is there a benefit to doing it out of Photoshop? It looks like possibly it's that color issue.
I have found more consistency for me doing it through Photoshop.
Okay. You have a lot less choices through that. I noticed about there's just a lot more choices about copyright and all sorts of things in Lightroom. So, okay, I'm going to try it. Thank you.
Just give it a try.
and when you
Richard.
adjusted, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dallas.
Richard, when I use it, I started exporting it through Photoshop as well, rather than to save it into Lightroom and export it through Lightroom. I think that when I send it to somebody, it's cleaner when I send it as export as. Am I crazy thinking that?
No, I have that gut level feeling too, but I haven't proved it.
What do you mean?
Now, let's talk about this for a second. When I get done working with this thing, and if I brought it in from Lightroom, I'm going to want to send it to do a save back into Lightroom also. So,
Okay.
because remember, I did not bring this one in through Lightroom, but if you in your save, if you use the save button and you've only brought it into Lightroom, it'll put it back in the folder and put it back into your Lightroom catalog. If you're using Lightroom for the cloud, it doesn't care. It'll put it wherever you tell it to. But if you're using Lightroom Classic, it does require, that you take some responsibility to where you put it. My problem with using Bridge, and I do use Bridge from time to time, but with using Bridge and with using the other cloud, is I have found sometimes that I can be overly creative with where I want to put things, which means I can never find them again. If you looked at my desk, and we've talked about this before, my desk for a person who is as scatterbrained as I can be, and a mad genius, has everything right where it's supposed to be. But if I get smart and I decide to put something where I can't lose it, I'll never find the bloody thing again. It's my life is just terrible that way. I had a thing I was doing with Jim Rubelard, and I put it somewhere really safe, and I found it a month and a half later. So Lightroom saves me from myself, and that's all I can ask you to do.
I would make you an honorary hunter. That's how I can hunt for everything.
One other real quick thing I want to share with you before we move on to the next part of the program is up here in the corner, you see this little thing that looks like a flag, maybe?
Mhm.
If you click on that, it gives you all of your presets for how your menus are set up. And we've talked about creating custom layouts. But if you're just starting out, I'm going to suggest if you go down to these here, these are all layouts that Adobe has, in its wisdom, given you. So seeing how we're mostly photographers, I'm going to suggest that you start life out by clicking photography. And this puts the controls that they think you as a photographer need. It puts the toolbar on the left-hand side, gives you the histogram and the navigator. It gives you adjustment layers and libraries. And then it gives you layers, channels, and paths. Okay? So this is a good starting point laid out for photographers.
Richard, can you go over one thing again for me?
Sure.
In order to clip the layer to the other layer, you're going to hold the Alt key, but what are you going to be putting your cursor on? Do you have both of them?
Let me just go back so we can see. I'm going to go back to the library that I'm more used to using. And you can see, as I develop them, I just give them numbers and names. And I obviously play with these a lot. So here's what I had. So that's the thing I had clipped. I'm going to hold down the alternate, the option key, and I'm going to hold it so it's between the two. And I'm going to click on this, and now they're no longer clipped.
Okay, so you're holding it between the two layers you're going to clip together.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and I'm going to see here. So, well, do you want to do these two? No. Do you want to do these two? No. I want to do these two. Clip. Now these are clipped together. And so it means that whatever I do on this layer only affects this layer. That's what that means. So I can turn it on and off. Now in this picture, I should have done something more spectacular so you could see it. But I can turn it on and off to see if I like it or not, but it doesn't affect anything else that's below. That's the beauty of it. That is a really powerful move, and it's not in the documentation. Because I'm using a custom menu over here, I've hidden some of the menu items, so I've got to click that button to see them all. Here, merge visible. See this one down here? It's missing one of the controls. So merge visible. Okay, ready? I'm going to merge visible. This is the way you're supposed to collect these things. I lost those layers. Did you see that? Those adjustment layers I had, they're gone. I can't go back and fix them. So another control that you probably need to know about is a thing called history. I've got it on my control panel. If you go up here to Windows, history is this piece right here. And what I can do is I can undo what I just did. I can go back as many steps as I need to go. So this is proven to be one of my favorites. All right, so in here, does that help at all with the basic thing into Photoshop?
Yes.
Yes.
A lot of information.
Well, I do that to you, and I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Good.
You won't break anything. You can push these sliders anywhere you want, and with this history panel, you can go back and undo things pretty much at will. The only downside is that this is only for this session. It doesn't keep packed sessions. So on this screen, let's get rid of this. The way you get back to the entry screen is this little house up here. If you just click on that, it'll bring you back to your panel of the stuff that you can do. And one of the issues we're always told is that the camera mimics our eyes in that it sees blue, green, and red. And that's kind of true, but this is in fact how the cones in our eyes perceive colors. And you notice that the three different kinds of cones, in fact, register the colors across the spectrum. Does that come as a surprise?
No.
So these are the waves in general. And this little band here is the part that we're able to see, which we break down going from red to kind of violet blue. And those three different sets of cells in our eyes pick up these wavelengths and send signals to our brains. The numbers are not distributed. We have ones that register red, 64% of the, I think it's 8 million that we have, are red, 32% are green, and 4% is blue. Green is the easiest for us to see because it registers on more cones than any of the others, which is why we tend to see those better. Okay? So that's the biological part of our eye. Our cameras are more mechanical. It, in fact, does have filters that are blue, green, and red. Light comes through some little lenses, cuts down and goes through some colored filters, and each chip manufacturer and each different chip uses different formulas to make those color inks and allows light to pass down to sensors that are colorblind, which is then processed through our cameras and its software to turn them into red, green, and blue signals. That's how the camera works. How does the eye do it? Anybody? Where does the eye send the signals?
To your retina?
It sends them to your brain.
Oh, yeah. Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, well, pretty quick. And the problem with the brain is that it has a will of its own. If you hate violet, it'll tend to have all kinds of bad associations with violet. If you have a defect in your eye, it'll recalibrate what it thinks that color was and make it something else. If the color of the day is chartreuse, it might put a chartreuse blend on everything. To make matters worse, our eyes adjust so quickly to color balances that if I'm working on an image in a bright room and I'm wearing the red shirt that I'm wearing today, that red cast will go onto my monitor and my eyes will think it's white because it makes adjustments in a split second. In Photoshop, we describe our colors by these formulas, and we've got 4 different sets of formulas here. Hue, which is just a fancy name for color. Saturation, how dense it is. And B for brightness, how bright we perceive it to be. Or the numbers that we think are the red, green, blue values for a color. In LAB color space, we have brightness, and then we have an A and a B channel, which each goes between 2 different colors. It's, by the way, is the most accurate and the largest color space we can work in. CMYK has to do with the colors of ink. So if you've got a printer, this is basically what the printer's doing. And when you take a picture in Photoshop that's in RGB and you send it to your printer, it is translated from RGB, this one, into this one, CMYK. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for black. And printers added that to the system to make things show up better. This number down here is the computer code for the color, and each color has its own code. So the basic difference we have to deal with is that the eye, the camera sensor, and your monitor all see stuff differently. We talked about the cones. That's the part of our eyes that distinguish color. 64% red, 32% green, 4% blue. The resolution of the human eye is about the same as a 252 megapixel sensor. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Our recognition of color and adjustments to it is instantaneous, and every color that's out there that we can see, we can see. The Bayer arrays is not equally distributed also. 25% are red, 50% are green, 25% are blue. That does not look like what the eye looks like, does it? It's different.
What's a Bayer array?
A Bayer array is that where I showed you that there was the little colored pieces of plastic that are red, green, and blue that change the white light into signals that can go on the sensors. That's the array that makes that separation.
Okay.
So the camera that I showed you, the little Canon camera, is 1/10 the resolution of what my eye is. And our eyes see a smaller color grouping than our eyes can see. Our monitors, the ones that we're all looking at right now, are in fact about the same as a 2 megapixel camera. That's the resolution on your screen right now. Now that's kind of surprising, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
and I paid
it's
all
set-
this money for this.
I'm sorry?
I paid all this money for this computer, and that money is 2%.
Well, it's the same as the rest of us that got 2, but that's just the size of it. That 1900 by 1200 works out to being about 2 megapixels. And it uses the smallest color space, which is the sRGB. So what does that mean? This represents the colors that we can see. Now, of course, it's a computer simulation, so it's not, but this is kind of what it is. So we see reds, greens, and blues, and they kind of mix together. So that's what our eyes are capable of seeing. These are the colors that our cameras are capable of seeing. So we lose some of those blues and we lose a lot of those greens, but we get to keep most of the reds. This is the colors that our monitor can show us. So we've lost reds, blues, greens, yellows, cayennes. We've lost a lot. This is the situation here. The dull color is the colors we get to see. The darker colors are the colors that our cameras can capture in RAW. And triangle is the images are the colors that our cameras capture or save if we do a JPEG and that our monitors can show. When Newton did his discovery, he talked about not talking about what colors meant because he said colors are too variable and they depend on the individual. 300 years later, guess what? We've decided that colors are not what we think they are. They're too variable and dependent upon the individual. Boy, full circle. Colors are not stable. Have you noticed sometimes that when you're not feeling well, colors look differently? Also, as we get older, our eyes get less sharp and less attuned. Colors tend to mute out, which is why a lot of the very elderly have troubles with pastels because they can't see them. Their eyes are not clicking on those cylinders. And of course, cataracts don't help that at all. So we're stuck in a world most of the time that deals between two different ways of looking at color. The artistic or intuitive way, which is based on experience. These are the colors as we've been using them for 300 to several thousand years. And the technical, the ones that our computer screens and monitors use, which is the RGB digital wheel. As we're working, our computers and how we want to manipulate the color requires technical knowledge. What we want to do with the colors depends on artistic or intuitive colors. And to make matters even worse, the color wheel that Adobe provides us is some kind of a crazy blend between these two. To make matters worse, if we look at those colors on the top row, they all have the same mathematical luminosity. They're all equally bright. But our brain reinterprets that luminosity to that bottom row. So we think yellow is the brightest color up there, and blue is the darkest color. But according to color science, they all have the same luminosity. Isn't that a kick in the pants? So here's that snapshot that we kind of looked at before you saw. This was taken in Uruguay. And it's a market, and this was because someone had told me that there were no vegetables in Uruguay, and well, they really are. Everybody can see this snapshot?
Right.
Pretty much
Yes.
tell what stuff is,
Yes.
lots of information. If I take out the luminosity information, this is what I have. This is the color information in that slide. If I strip out the color but leave the luminosity, this is what I have. So this is the 6,000 or 6 million cones, and this is the 120 million rods. As a creature, we were designed to be able to see this way. The color was kind of an adaptation that came later. The thing you have to remember that even when you're seeing all that color, your brain and eye was processing this information first. So we can discern about 10 million different colors all across the spectrum, 6 million in the color sensitive cones. Remember, only 4% of those are blue. 120 million rods. That is to say that we are 20 times more sensitive to black and white color and line and texture than we are to color. This is not new information. It's been known for a long time, and it was codified back in 1907 by Ross. He was a professor at Harvard, and he developed a 9-tone scale to help painters and printers use their colors to transmit information to the viewers. And this system is still taught and used today. 9 tones plus black and white. And this is an application. All I did was take those tones and put them on top of bands of colors. Red, yellow, blue, green, magenta, and cayenne. In 1939, Adams came up with his zone system, which is revolutionary, and we all thought, why wasn't he brilliant? It has 10 zones going from black to white, and the differences in those zones is based on exposure. If we look at the two, they look awfully similar, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference is down in zones 2 and 3 that we can easily perceive, maybe 4 as well. But basically all Adams did was take Ross's system and adapt it to a camera. To make this go a little bit farther, in 1960, Noble, who was an animator, he worked for Disney and for I guess Warner Brothers. Is that who did Bunny the Rabbit and those guys? And because they did their painting for the cartoons and animations, they had to use a special paint. And the paint they used was because it had to go on clear acetate. So the colors across the top are the colors he used. And because he was so sensitive to trying to get things to show and to get depth and to feeling due to the tones, he took each of those colors and mapped them out on the scale of 32 different colors, or different tones. Look here at 7, 8, 9. How many colors all have the same level of gray in them? Isn't that outrageous? That all of these have the same value. If you were to turn them to black and white, they would all look the same. Let's try that again. If I were to take away the color and only show them as grays, each line across would be the same tone, the same color gray.
Wow.
Color science marches on. They keep trying to figure out what color is and who sees what and when they see it and where. And so this is a cull-out of brightest that was done in about the year 2000. So it thinks white is the brightest color. This kind of chartreuse color is next. Then comes yellow. Then another green. Then this kind of yellow, orange, then to a green. As we go down the thing, the tones become darker. And in this scale, black is the darkest color, but the one next up from the bottom is a dark, dark blue. Isn't that interesting? So that's the latest science on how the brightness of the colors are registered. Now, we're talking about manipulating pictures, and you got to just accept the fact that all images are manipulated. They're manipulated when someone decides what picture to take, what camera to use, what lens to use, what film to use, how to process it, how to print it, on and on and on. As we change that first image into a black and white to try and find out where the tones are, the system that we use changes what the color. So these are the four most popular way to take a color image and turn it into a black and white. Desaturation, the lab color, which is probably the most accurate, the gradient map that I like the best, and the black and white adjustment layer. And notice they all render things differently. Isn't that surprising? So black and whites are not black and white. It depends on the way you take the color image and turn it into black and white. So are your eyes glassed over yet?
No, my brain is going all over the place. It's like, oh my gosh, all this information. Very cool, but wow.
Richard, it's so interesting as I make quilts and I pay a lot of attention to where the colors are. But when I think I have everything ready, I always take a photo and put it in black and white to see.
Yep.
It's amazing to me how many areas are the same. So
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're looking at. In fact, while I was doing the research for this, I found color wheels for quilters that include color wheels that have cutouts so you can put it on the cloth to try and see which is which. And you flip it on one say it's the color, flip it the other way, it's the tone of gray that color is. Just to do that. And we perceive those colors on a subconscious level, which is why black and white photography is so powerful. And by the way, when we're talking about monochrome, all we're talking about is those tones in only one color. So that strip I showed you with the different colors with the Ross thing, those were all monochromatic color splotches going from white to black with all of those tones in between.
That's why I think it's so difficult to get a really good black and white or photograph, because when like I found that when you take a color photograph and you're turning it into a black and white, there isn't necessarily the beautiful variance of the black and to get to the white, because there's so much of the color that's all in the same grayscale.
That's why Ross and Adams only give you 9 tones basically to work with. Human beings, the average human being can see between 7 and 15 tones that we're capable of recognizing that we see the difference. Our eyes see all the different ones, but we don't recognize them. When I was...
And it all depends how frequently you look at it.
I'm sorry?
Because you have to train your eye. And you stop training it goes from 15 to 7. If you train it, it goes to 7 to 15. Right,
you can do that. And people that are very adept, like the Noble guy, he obviously had an eye that could see a lot more, but that's, he was at the top of his game and is in that industry is one of the, he's the Ansel Adams of their industry.
I had a friend who was a great printer. And he said, I can't print now. I didn't print for 2 weeks. And he lost that sensitivity.
All right, so these are a simple color wheel in those change from color to black and white with that same procedure that you saw in the other one. And I'm going to take this tool here and I'm going to hover on this red right here. So that red right there, if you look at the L channel here, see it says 74? That's the brightness of that shade or tone of red. If I click on this one, 67. Click on this one, 61. This one, 50. And this is 47. Actual red is right about here. So that's using the L channel. Let's go over here and use the saturated layer. The red, 73, 60, 52, 45, 36. Black and white adjustment layer, 69, 63, 49, 41, 36, gradient map, 64. 64, 78. That's a lot of difference, isn't it?
Mhm.
60 versus 67. 43 versus 62. What's the third up? This one? 33, 52. 29, 44. Now, here's the terrible thing. They're all right, but they're all different.
Okay, Richard, when you're looking at the L, is that like the luminosity type, you know, so
Yes.
how bright it is? Okay.
It is. In
So
the
that's
lab,
why the gradient map is, it looks like the gradient map is deeper or
Contrast.
not as there's not as much luminosity.
well, until you get over here, but but it has them. But you're right. It does the colors. It shows the colors deeper because that's in a gradient map. You're taking all of the color ranges and equally dividing them across the spectrum. And we're going to, in this next example, you're going to see exactly how that works. So, yeah. But you can pick any of these things. You just pick them here and they just go across and the numbers jump in. So that L number here, in the lab color, L is the brightness. So it separates brightness or luminosity from the colors. So A and B are the colors, L is the black and white. So that's the way we can very quickly see what they are. You have this brightness down here, and it changes also, but I think you get a more accurate reading from the lab one. Just, I find it easier to find. Okay, that was kind of interesting, wasn't it? And by the way, this is the color wheel that I started with. And you can see it's this layer here that have the most intense, or what we would call pure colors. Okay.
I'm getting lost as to why we're looking at it these different ways. Is it because of different software that we're doing? Obviously, the camera and our eyes and stuff see it differently, but how do we use this in Photoshop?
Hopefully you're going to see that with this next example.
Okay.
But first off, I wanted to share with you that it makes a difference how you decide to convert your photograph. So here's the photograph that we looked at before. So it's gone through its most basic of processing. So the normal way to turn this into a black and white is to go to a black and white adjustment layer. You go down here to the little stop sign and it says black and white. Click on it, and that gives you a black and white image. And, you can adjust it. You can move what the different colors respond to. See how that blue impacts the beats and the wood? See that? And so that's one way of changing. And the one that Adobe puts forth as being the way to do it, to change your color image into a black and white. I personally prefer, click on my device here and see down here where it says gradient map. So I click on that and it gives me a gradient map. This one, see, is going from white to black, and I really would rather to go from the other way around. So that gives me a black and white image. It's a lot more intense. And I can change it from the new ways that Adobe is saying we can look at that. I prefer the classic because I'm used to it. But you can use every, you get those three controls. And now I have a black and white image. So far, so good?
Yep.
And that's pretty decent. So the technique I'm going to suggest that you do is to take that image, and after you turn it into a gradient map, you add a black and white adjustment layer under it. And now I can take my blacks and whites and adjust within that tonal range. See that? So why is this important? I'm deciding which part of this picture I want to have the most contrast and the most emphasis of. Look, if I bring the yellows up, see how those cabbage leaves are brightening up, but I'm losing. So if I bring that back down, I can see the bananas. See them?
Mhm.
And look what happened to my cabbage leaves over here and my tomatoes. So I can bring those things down and I can begin to decide how I want those tones to read. So there I've got a black and white image that I kind of like. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
So I have a black and white image. Well, this is good, but what can I do with color? Well, one of the things I can do is I can take, let me bring it up here, is I can come to here. So this stamp visible here is the same as the black and white, right?
Yep.
So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, gee, I think, now I'm doing the intellectual part of my artistry, that I think I'd like these grapes in here to be more important. I'd like them to be brighter. And I think I'd like to have a leading eye come in. Would that sound like a good design principle?
Yeah.
And you say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Richard. So what I'm going to do is on top of this, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do, I'm going to do a curves layer. And seeing how I want these to be brighter, that means I want it to be bright. So let me use my finger and I'm going to grab these grapes and I'm going to make them what I want to be brighter. Well, what happened to my picture?
Everything came brighter.
Everything became brighter. How do I fix that?
Mask layer.
I put a mask on it. So what I'm going to do is I've got a mask here, and I'm just going to hit Command or Control and the letter I. That'll take that white mask and that'll make it black. So far, so good?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I wanted the grapes to be brighter. So I'm going to paint with white paint on the black mask. So white's been selected here. I'm going to come up here with my brush. And that brush is probably a tad small. So I'm going to click on my brush here. I'm going to leave it fairly soft. That's too big.
Can you use your bracket keys?
I can. I'm just trying to show both. I'm going to do here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I'll use my right bracket key to make it bigger. All right. So I've got that. It's a reasonably soft brush. I'm going to look up here. I'm going to do it at 100% flow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint white paint on top of those grapes. So did they become more important? Did they brighten up a lot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what else I would like? What else I would like was be a leading line. So let me put a leading line in here. I'm going to take my white brush and I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm going to bring from this guy's shiny shoe across these radishes through this sign and onto the, let me make it a little bigger. See the leading line? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. I thought those were beets. Those are some awful big radishes, Richard.
Your beets. Well, they're black and white. How could I know? All right. And I'm looking at this thing. You know what I would not like them to do is to spend much time looking at, maybe these are parsnips over here, but certainly not old Baldy here. So what I'm going to do, on top of this curves layer, I'm going to put another curves layer. Curves. And this time, I'm just going to grab it anywhere. And this is it because it doesn't matter now. All I'm trying to do is get darkness. So I've made everything dark. The whole thing got dark, right?
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this mask. This is the darkening mask. I'm going to Command or Control and the letter I. I'm going to use white paint again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint out old Baldy here. I'm going to paint this guy out. I really don't want you to pay much attention to him. And I'm going to cut down my opacity maybe in half. Kind of darken those things down. And the top of these, I think they're potatoes, look a little blown out. So I'm going to get rid of the flash of the night. See how that's gone away? All right, so I've used, on my black and white, I've got a leading light in. I've made the grapes brighter. I've gotten rid of this, it's either corn or parsnips, and I've kind of darkened this head. Oh, that head got too carried away. So what can I do is I can change my brush to black, come back over this guy here, and get rid of that black paint I put there. So that's been adjusted and it's non-destructive. And a trick that I picked up from reading about the animators, that I'm going to go back here put another layer on here, and I'm going to use white paint, and I'm going to use an opacity of 100%, and I'm going to use a really small, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a couple of these grapes pure white. Okay? Everybody with me?
Mhm.
The animators and the classic painters and stage makeup artists use white to bring your eye, to pure white, to bring to something, but they try to make it small enough that you don't see it. So these are all the adjustments I've made after turning it into a black and white. I'm going to go ahead at this point and do another stamped visible. So that's just that same black and white layer. I'm going to turn these off. I don't need these anymore. So that's the black and white layer. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change its blend mode from normal to luminosity. Because I showed you, and we're talking, you can see the white dots there. So I probably should have made them smaller. But so what's the impact of that? That's the picture without doing this work. This is the picture we just did. Now, I might have made this too bright. I can see that. I can tone that back down now if I want to. But I think my grapes are nice. I like what it's done to the potatoes. Isn't that an interesting issue?
It looks to me like it's for life.
Yeah. Well, it has more dimension.
Yeah.
See it? And I haven't been heavy-handed with the color. I haven't changed colors. All I've done is change the tonal value.
Now, would you brighten or darken that, whatever that dark green is between your potatoes and your tomatoes?
This here? Sure, I can do that. Let me come back here on top of this. Here. I'm going to do another curves adjustment layer. The one's here. Let's use our targeted tool here. I'm going to click on these. See how dark it is? I'm going to lighten those up right there. Okay. So it's only these that I want. So I'm going to take my white mask, Control I to make it black. White brush. I'm going to bring my flow down this time so I can build it up slowly. Bring it down to about 20. I'm going to make my brush softer and I'm going to make it larger. Too large. So I'm going to use my bracket key to bring it down. And maybe what I want to do is make him a little lighter. Okay. So what have I done here? I've done all kinds of changes to my color, but I have not been destructive. What do you think of that? Okay, that one of the issues whenever we're doing Photoshop, at least to my mind, is I want people, when they look at my work, to go Photoshop, and I want it to be a question. I don't want it to be an accusation. I want it to appear like it could possibly have been the way that it was. I'm accepting the fact that I am not a traffic camera, that some part of my spirit is involved in that photograph. Something brought me to take that picture. In this case, it was to prove to somebody that there was, in fact, vegetables growing in Uruguay. But that picture, when I get done with it, has part of the vibrancy and the depth and the feel and the texture that I think I saw. Did I really see it? I haven't got the faintest idea. Because this brain edited, it automatically photoshopped the picture while I was standing there. Right? You know, when I look at the people I love, they don't have graying hair. I don't know anybody who's salt and pepper. They're light colored, they're dark colored, they might get to white, but my brain automatically gets rid of zits, takes off 10 or 15 pounds, changes their eye color so they're not quite as bloodshot, unless they're really on death's door, and then I can't do much about that. But my brain does that. And I'm just asking you to accept that because I want you to see what I saw. Because if you just saw what somebody else saw, what value is it?
Mm-hmm.
This is the Elaine Doonan Castle in Gotland. It's up near the Isle of Skye. And like I said, I took this picture about 6 or 7 years ago. And yeah, I thought this was a pretty great picture. I was pretty proud of it. It shows the castle, looks pretty good. But I've learned that I can do this instead. Now, besides the fact that I put some lights in the windows and made it evening time, did you notice that there's a difference in feeling how the castle has dimension? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
All right. So this is one of those things that tone can come in and help us do. So we're going to go from this to this and try and work our way up fairly quickly. All right?
Yeah.
And all of you are capable of doing this. It's not hard. It just requires that you take some time. And so this is the photograph that I took.
Is it a smart object?
Yeah, down here, if you look at the bottom, it's a smart object.
Yep. All right. Yeah.
Now, I do it as a smart object, so I've got a place to retreat from. But what I almost always do is I make a copy of that smart object, like I did the two that we did in the first exercise, where I did the sky on one smart object and the base on another smart object. And then I combine them and then I rasterize it. So I only have a single layer. And that's only to save space. So as I looked at this picture, I decided that I did not like these people. And the people up here kind of got in my way. And I didn't like this sign. And I really, now here, watch this trick. I'm going to grab the bear with measurements on it. I'm going to drag it over. I didn't like the fact that this castle wall was drunk. See it?
Mm-hmm.
Now I had cleaned up, I knew before, to move that, I can bring in another one. I can bring in as many as I want. I'd already cleaned up the walls that I recognized. If I hit up here the move tool and grab the construction line, I can move it around. So that one's pretty straight. That one's pretty straight. That one's pretty straight. But this one down here, I don't know what he was drinking, but he wasn't sharing. So what I did, and this is just a simple contrast aware fill and clone stamp, as I just clean those things up. So I killed off the people down here, killed off the people here, got rid of the sign, got rid of the drain pipe. Remember there's a drain pipe back there? You go to see the drain pipe?
Oh, yeah.
Got rid of the drain pipe, and I fixed the drunken wall. I also got rid of 2 guys that were hanging out here. I don't know what they were thinking, but I left the 3 girls. But then the next thing I did was try to decide what I wanted the picture to be. So I'm going to go back here to my zoom tool, and I'm going to make it fit the screen again so I can see what I've got to do. And I said, well, what I'm really interested in is the castle. I don't need this piece of wall so much, and I don't need all of this stone down in here. So I played around and used my aperture tool. We've played with that before, and tried to figure out what gave me the best collection of lines and intersections that went on the castle that I wanted, and kind of decided that an 11 by 17 image is probably what I want to end up with. I'm not going to crop it now, only because I've learned that sometimes as I go through these processes, I make other decisions that I might want more or less of something. But I did make a mark. I just drew a painted line on its own layer so that I know what I was actually planning to work. Best I can see is that there are 3 planes here. We've got this wall, we've got this wall, and we've got this wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tool up here, the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just going to grab here. If I hold the shift down key, it'll keep it straight. I'm going to come down to here. Hold down the shift key to come up here straight. And come over to here. Okay, so I've outlined that wall, right? Is I'm going to come up here to the select tool, and I'm going to save a selection. I'm going to save this selection here. So I'm going to save a selection, and I'm going to call this selection PUG. I'm going to call that the hall. Okay? And I'm going to click OK. So there's a selection. I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to take that same tool, and I'm going to go from here, the straight line up here. Now, when I actually did this, I did all these little steps. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to. And problem there. That's closer. Come into here. Into here. So there's one. I'm going to go back up here to select. Save selection. I'm going to call this PUG Hall Court for Courtyard. Okay, so now that's been saved. If I come over here and look at my channels, you can see that I have done that for all of the faces. See them here?
Mm-hmm.
So I went through and I identified all the faces, including the part that was nasty. See how this castle wall, you can see there's a plane here where it makes a couple of steps in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get away from it, you can't see that articulation occurs in the battlement. This building back here sits back from this wall that's part of another part of the fortification, and they both fit back from this well courtyard up in here. So I made all of those, and then just so I could see what I had done, so what I did is I blocked out where the ones that I made were. The colors aren't important. They're just ways for me to identify to make sure that I caught everything that I thought I needed to caught. I decided I was going to leave this wall as being standard and work off of it. So each one of these is a selection that was in my selection system. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Then what I did is I took them, I'm holding down the Alt key and clicking on the map. So that's the first selection right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just did a curve. I'm clicking on the curve twice so you can see it. And all I did here was lighten that wall. See it?
Yeah.
All I did was raise the curve. So can you see how it got lightened a little bit there?
Yeah.
Okay, after I did that, then I went to the next piece. That's this one here. That's the next piece of the wall right there. See?
Yeah.
What did I do there? I darkened that a little bit. See how it got darker?
Mm-hmm. So you played with the luminosity of each section.
Each of those panels. That's
section.
exactly what I did.
Yeah. And each one you adapted it so that it would almost like it's like 135, whatever. Gave it enough that it would see that you could see depth now.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So let's look at this. This is the next one up. And I did them next to each other so I could get a feeling for what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first step in. Let's zoom in on that.
That's incredible.
This, by the way, is really nice to do on modern buildings. All right, so down here, I cut out around the girl. See her? So I'm doing just this panel right here, but I took her out. And you can see, there it is. I made it darker.
Yeah.
The next one I made darker still. And then I decided that I would lie and make this next part, which probably should have been darker, but I made it lighter so that it would read as if it had been lit by something. You know, I took a artistic liberty with it. And I worked my way around. So see, I lightened up that wall. Next one, I lightened that one. So we can see that this is different than this is different than that.
Yeah.
And this stuff can all be pretty simple. Our eye picks it up. See how that made that recess? I no longer think it's part of that same wall. I can tell that this is out in front. Steps back.
That's amazing.
And you can do this with gradients and all kinds of other stuff. So I just brought it up to try and air. See, this is sits back. There's a big patio up here on the top part of the castle.
Mm-hmm.
And then these turrets, they just kind of went away, but I thought they were kind of important. It made it look like a castle. So I took artistic license to make these pop out a little bit more, because if they're lighter, they're going to come forward. Then I decided that I wanted a little bit more pop. So what I did is I drew a line. Do you see them pop up?
Yeah.
Okay. Because in our mind's eye, there are lines there.
Can you deselect the ants so you can see it better?
Sure. Select, deselect.
Okay. Yeah. You
So
can
I
see
put
the
them on
line.
their own layer.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much, but it helps make them stand out. And as you get away from the photograph, you don't know that you're seeing them. They're there. So that's the articulation layer, which is what that sequence is called, articulation. So that's how that happens. So let me move out just a little bit. I've got the magnifying glass. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, which turns it into a magnet, and just click it. So now no articulation. Articulation.
It's no wonder, Richard, it's taken you 6 years. It would have taken me 20.
Well, that's because I got to keep showing off for you guys.
Oh
Now,
my gosh, that's amazing.
now one of the tricks that I'll do, because I'm trying to see this stuff, let me go to full screen, is I just stuck in here a black and white layer so that I could see it. So I got the black and white, so let me turn the articulation on. Off now. Now it's on. So I got the color out of my way so I could see what was happening with the tones. So that's just a working layer. Now, the next thing I know, and we've talked about, is the eye likes to go to, what it knows is the subject, what is brightest, what is sharpest, what is most contrasty. So what I did is put a high pass filter on the building. Let me go in so you can see it better. Let me turn, I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to click on the mask. That turns it off. So I did a high pass filter.
Wow.
Did a high pass filter, and then I put a mask on it. So now Castle has the sharpest thing, and that makes it pop even more. So the next thing I wanted to show you is, see over here, there's a halo.
Mhm.
So I'm going to kill that halo now. At the end, I'll show you how I did it. But see how the halo just went away?
Mhm.
So that's a technique we're going to learn here a little bit. So now I'm feeling kind of artsy fartsy. So what I started using is some lookup tables. If you haven't used lookup tables, down here to the little stop sign. And there it is right there. So you
Where's
click on the color lookup.
Where was the stop sign there? Where was the stop
Look
sign?
down here on the bottom. Let me,
Oh, down at the bottom. Okay.
down here, you got several really
Yeah.
clever tools down here. This one allows you to work on adjustments within the layers that, if we have time, I'll show you on this example because they're in there, and pick things. The next one over measures angles. This one makes masks. This one brings up adjustment layers. This one, I'm calling it a stop sign or European sign. And that's where your curves and solid colors are and gradients. So it's right, color lookup. Click on color lookup. And if you look in here, so color lookup tables are much like a mathematics table. And it just says, you pick this one, it's going to do this, this, and this. So and you can make your own, but it's combinations of color adjustments. And Adobe gives you a series of them.
Under gold, blue. Yeah.
Cold crimson. So I click on cold crimson, and it just put this color treatment on the picture.
So it's like a filter. Is it?
It's several different colors going in together. It's you make them up. So I put that one on and said, well, I kind of like this color on the brick, but it's a little intense for me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to mask it out. That's what I did here. And then I'm going to use on that same layer, change the opacity to bring down the color that I wanted. So that's the gold. See, just on the building and the bridge.
Yeah.
So I thought it made the castle feel more like what I thought I remembered. And then I thought it might be nice to do, make it more evening time. So I tried two. There's a night from day filter and a moonlight filter. So this is what the moonlight looks like. And this is what the night from day looked like. And I didn't see a whole lot of difference. And this is maybe a little bit bluer. So I picked one of those and it changed its adjustment. Then what I did, all I've done, this is just a creative mode, said, well, that's kind of nice, but if it was daytime, I would hope that the lights would be on. So what did I do? I made it a Windows layer. By the way, this one next to the garbage can will make a new layer. I just click on that. So I've got a new layer. I'm going to, I probably want the windows to be yellow. Make them any color I think I want. I'm going to come down into here. If I can see the windows, I'm going to get a paintbrush. I'm going to use the left bracket key to make it small. And then I'm just going to paint in the window. And you can be as compulsive about this as you want. So I think those three should be on. I think it would be nice to have the lights up in the balcony on. Command Z gets rid of that. Window there. There's a window here. You get the idea what I've done here.
Mhm.
Then what I said is, maybe it would make sense if I make this a smart layer. Why do I want to make it a smart layer or smart object? Because I want to be able to come back and adjust it. And that's what a smart does. So that's smart. And what do I want to do? Well, I think the first thing I want to do is I think that's too bright. I'm going to dim them down. So come up here to the top, Windows, opacity, and I'm going to make them less. That kind of looks like it might be a glow from a window, yes?
Mhm.
Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like that light to spill out. So I'm going to come over here and I can do it a couple of ways. I can right click in the field over here and get some tools. I can double click, I can get this set of tools. And I think what I'd like to do is make an outer glow. You see what just happened? Look at the windows.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can make that glow stronger, lighter, and change its fill, and move it around. So I can adjust that to be whatever it is I think I want it to be. I just want it to look like the lights are on, not like it's a horror movie. So there they are. Now, because it's a smart object, I can come in here with my yellow paint again. It's my paintbrush, and I can. This is window here happens to go on the ballroom of the castle. The same thing here. I can this one, bring the glow into it, and do it all the way across. So that's what I did to make the windows. Okay,
Very cool.
isn't that fun? So we got the windows. I did this. I decided that the ballroom needed to be brighter, so I went ahead and did more on top of it, because after all, it is the ballroom. And then I went back and I used my camera raw filter, and I used it as an adjustment layer. Why did I do that? I did that because I wasn't happy with the. I thought that when I put the lookup table, on it, I thought the sky wasn't dramatic enough. So I played with that. And then I used some darkening and lightening in here to do that. And then I continued to muck around, doing some color adjustment layers with the sky. And then because I thought it was getting a little bit too colorful, I added a black and white filter on top to take some of the blue tint out to make it more of a gray Scottish looking sky. And then I took out too much blue. See how the blue is now adjusted just to this layer? That little clipping mask there, see it?
Hmm.
And then of course, you guys know that I'm always big on putting vignettes around, organic vignettes. So this is the vignette sequence. And so you could see what it was. I put a black layer on it and then a mask so you could see the picture. So what did we do? We went from all that manipulation. It's clear without my yelling at you that the picture is of the castle and that it has dimension. So let me just do one last little quickie here before I set you free. I'm going to create a new layer on top of the stamp visible. And what I'd like to do is let's get rid of this. See the white line here, the halo?
Mhm.
That halo is better. So I've got a halo here. What I'd like to do is make it go away. The easiest way to do that is to take the clone stamp, that's this one. It doesn't have to be very big. I like them to be soft when I do them. Like that. And what I want to do is paint whatever I'm going to paint so that it makes the white part go away, but it doesn't do anything to the dark part. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, you still see the halo? All right, so I'm going to change the blend mode to darken. So what darken does is it's going to take whatever I'm going to do, and if what I'm doing is darker than what's there, it's going to paint it. But if it's lighter than what's there, it's going to paint it dark. But if it's darker, it won't. So here we go. I'm going to take my clone stamp tool. I'm going to grab space here. So I'll take the Alt key and click on it, and that grabs some color. And over here, paint. And notice, see it go down? Now what that means is that I made it too big and too strong. So let me undo that. That's Control Command Z. Let me make the brush a little smaller, and let me take flow. And it's always better to build these things up. So click here, click. See it go away?
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit overrun here. So it's not painting on top of the darker stuff. Isn't that neat? Now it's a little time consuming, but it goes from, oh, you clone stamped that, it doesn't look very real. Alt. And I like to do it pretty close to where I'm working so that the colors you come closer to matching. Pretty amazing, huh?
That is amazing.
So, boy, did we cover a lot of stuff tonight.
Oh, wow.
Kaylee, did I mess your mind?
Completely.
There you go.
Very intimidated, got a lot to learn, but thank you very much.
Okay, now the thing is, and then sharing with you, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's taken me at least 7 years that I've been playing with that photograph. Enough, I won a competition with it in the last way. It was really good enough, but not as good as I could be by doing more and more. So it's practicing and trying and just accepting the fact that it's there. Any questions before I bid you adieu?
It's wonderful. Thank you, Richard.
Oh,
Thank you.
As always, questions are welcome. I'm more than happy to answer them. There is no such thing as a foolish question except for the one that you don't ask. No matter what you think is dumb and stupid, I have done this dumb and stupid myself multiple times. And I'm only teaching this because I've done more than you have. That's the only difference. We're walking down this path together. I've just been down it earlier. So ask them, if you have an image you want me to work on, send it by. If you want to send me a full RAW file, you can use WeTransfer. It's a free way to send big files. WeTransfer.com. I'll put that in the notes. It's actually easier to use than Dropbox.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I thought so too. And Jen Rubelard turned me on to it. So
Fantastic.
it's an easy one to use, uses big files. I just sent him a huge movie for the next one.
Can anyone open it?
I'm sorry?
Like it's not dependent on Mac or Windows or anything.
No,
Anybody can
it
open
doesn't. Yeah, what it does is it puts it up into its server, and then it gives you a link that you send to somebody.
Is
You
it
click
free?
on that link, downloads it, and there it is.
Is it free, Richard?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Is it free?
Free.
Up to a limit.
Repeat those letters again, Richard.
Sure. WE, as in we, you and me.
Yep.
We
Yep.
transfer, like the bus company, TRANSFER.
Yep.
.com.
It's
Cool.
the secure site, secure.
I believe it is.
Yes.
Oh, you're telling me it is.
Donna says it is. It must be.
Yeah, I use it a lot for portraits. Tennessee told us about it, so.
Oh, wow, that's very
Tell
cool.
you, you're all getting to be really dangerous. So send it to me, and I'll open it. And if I don't understand what you're asking me, I'll ask you. I'll say, what are we trying to do here? What's the problem? And if you're not sure, say just make it look better. Then you'll get stuck with whatever I think looks better. Okay.
you.
Thank you so much for spending your evening with me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Wow, that was mind blowing.
Thank